Studies suggest that one-third to one-half of adolescents in the U.S. engage in some form of NSSI. All right, good morning, everybody. So let's get right into it. What is non suicidal self injury, NSSI? Non suicidal self injury is a term used to describe deliberate self harming behavior without the suicidal intent. Self harm is often used as a maladaptive coping technique to deal with distressing emotional states such as anger, depression, and mixed states. Let's look at some statistics. Recent studies suggest that one-third to one-half of adolescents in the U.S. engage in some form of NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury. It's more common among females. 70% of the teens engaged in NSSI have made at least one suicide attempt, and 55% have made multiple attempts. NSSI usually occurs between the ages of 11 and 15 and continues into adulthood. For clinicians, it is very challenging because of the obvious danger of the client harming themselves or suicide. And I just want to take a moment to share a brief example of I had encountered a 19-year-old young lady. She was in the custody of her biological father and her stepmom. The young lady had problems with her biological mom. Her mom had a very negative past. She was a substance user and very abusive, which is why she ended up in the care of her biological father. She came to me after her second visit with me, or during her second visit with me. It was revealed that she had been engaging in self-harming behavior. Her mood was very low. She had suicidal ideations. And so I asked her to show me her wounds, and she showed them to me. Even though that they were superficial, they were fresh, meaning that she had done them right before she came to see me. And so I reached out to her psychiatrist, which was in our clinic, and we both agreed that she needed to be admitted for inpatient because she was having suicidal ideations. It's very difficult for clinicians, when a teen comes in and they're struggling with self-harming behavior, to not always want to maybe want to consider admitting them. And so that's why it's good to assess them, especially if there's a risk of suicide or past attempts. It's definitely very essential to assess for risk and safety. Why NSSI? Common reasons are affect regulation. When people struggle with anxiety, anger, frustration, or depression, managing distressing thoughts. Sometimes teens they want to do it to distract from their problems, or even as an attempt to stop suicidal thoughts. Sometimes it's interpersonal, where they're trying to get attention or fit in with peers. Sometimes it's self punishment, and sometimes it helps them to stop dissociating. These are the most common types of NSSI: cutting, hitting, banging, punching walls and or objects to induce pain, breaking bones, interfering with the healing of an existing wound, and ingesting toxic substances. When it comes to cutting, a lot of times they usually cut on the arm, the wrist, and sometimes they cut on the thighs. Sometimes they cut um, on the side of their arm, in between their arm and their side of their chest. So these are some things that you want to kind of take into account when you get a child or a teen before you that is has been self-harming. We always want to try to identify the place where they're cutting, and so that we can examine it periodically to make sure that it's decreasing. NSSI used to be common among those who struggle with developmental disorders, eating disorders, and borderline personality. Recent studies suggest that NSSI is associated with internalizing disorders such as major depressive disorder, post traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorders, and externalizing disorders such as conduct disorders, oppositional defiant disorders, and substance abuse. Family risk factors associated with NSSI. When there's a parent that has mental illness such as depression, anxiety, bipolar, substance abuse, that is definitely a risk factor. When there is abuse or neglect in the home, that is definitely a risk factor. When there are a lot of losses, it's like bereavement, or something like that. When there's marital conflict and divorce, those are definitely risk factors. When there's high conflict in the home, when the adolescent is being criticized or rejected, and when there's low warmth, support, protection, or attachment, these are high risk factors for non suicidal self injury. Family protective factors. Family is the most potent developmental and protective factor in a child's life. Primary caregivers that provide loving warmth, security, and monitoring are, are better for adolescents functioning. They decrease non suicidal self injury, less suicide attempts, and lowers depression and anxiety. Let's look at the therapeutic rationale. Therapeutic rationale for DBT. In emotional situations, primarily those found in romantic, family, and friend relationships, some people are prone to react in a more intense and out of the ordinary manner. Arousal levels in such situations can increase far more quickly than the average person. Take a significant amount of time to return to baseline arousal levels. That's why non-suicidal self-injury is very common with borderline personality disorders. This is a key component of borderline personality disorders. Whenever there's a disruption in a relationship or fear of being rejected or abandoned, a lot of times the emotions are very high, very reactive, and oftentimes people threaten suicide or self harm in order to get that attention to secure that relationship. Why dialectical behavioral therapy techniques? Dialectical behavioral therapy is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy. The main goals are to teach people how to live in the moment, to cope healthy with stress, to regulate emotions, and to improve relationships with others. Components of DBT are compassionate and supportive. So the relationship between the counselor and the client are both compassionate and supportive. It is cognitive based because it focuses on the unhelpful thoughts and maladaptive coping skills. It is collaborative in that you're focusing on determining goals together, and it is empirically supported. Therapeutic rationale for attachment based family therapy techniques. Children internalize beliefs about self and expectations of others through early attachment relationships. Parent child interactions influence, if not determine, the development of negative, depressive cognitive thinking styles. For example, self worth and hopelessness. If you look in this picture here, you see a teen, and what they're carrying on their back, they're weighted down by all the negative thoughts that they have, and it's causing them to be overwhelmed and stressed out. Now, this is what happens often when there is insecure attachment in the home. YABFT. Attachment based family therapy is a type of family therapy that aims to help a parent and a child repair ruptures in their relationship, and works to develop or rebuild an emotionally secure relationship. Here are the therapeutic tasks for ABFT: relational reframe, alliance with the adolescent, alliance with the parent, reattachment task, and promoting competency of tasks. So we're going to take a look at what the treatment sessions would look like as we incorporate DBT and ABFT at a glance. The power of genuine counselor engagement: building trust, fostering therapeutic alliance, making sense of client's experience, expresses a willingness to participate in the client's journey. When dealing with adolescents and teens that struggle with NSSI, is the relationship between the counselor and the teen is very important. It actually sets the stage to repair attachments because with the transference between the child and the counselor, it serves as a building block and a new foundation to repair attachment because we're modeling what secure attachment would look like. Session 1: building a therapeutic alliance. The ABFT task is relational reframe, and the goals are to reframe problems and solutions. The client is not the problem. The parents are not the problem. Healing the family relationship is the solution. We want to assess the symptoms and establish a safety plan. Establish a treatment contract where both agree to participate. So, in this relational reframe aspect, most times a parent will bring a child in and it's like, well, this child has bad behavior, this child is depressed, or this child is that. And they often want to focus on helping the child as opposed to seeing how important the aspect of their relationship could be a healing factor. And then from the team's perspective, they want to say, well, the parent is the problem. So the whole focus of this first session is to reframe the relationship, to get the focus off of the child, to get the focus off of the parent as being the child, and look at the relationship as the solution to what's going on. So the ABFT relational reframe works in 3 phases, where the first phase is the joining and understanding the self-harming, where we orient the family to the treatment. So here's what you kind of explain what the treatment looks like, the number of sessions, the processes. You want to explore the strengths. You want to help the teen see and be able to give voice to the things that they're good at. You want to help the parent and encourage the parent to see the strengths and the things that their child is good at. You want to assess family dynamics. You want to assess the symptoms. And then we move into phase 2 where we shift the attachment themes, where we identify the attachment ruptures and we bring light to the impact of ruptures. So there, a transition question would be, how do you all connect at home? How would you best describe your relationship with your parent? And then once we bring to light those ruptures and the impact of those ruptures, then we want to solicit change talk to get both the teen and the parent on board to contract for change. Session 2 through 7, DBT tasks, is to build competency on distress tolerance and interpersonal effectiveness. Here we're working with the teen only, and we're working to build that therapeutic alliance to establish rapport. We want them to identify and be able to give voice to where the breakdown first began. We want to validate their thoughts and their feelings of injustice and identify primary emotions associated with the experience. We want to begin to educate them on what distress intolerance is and talk to them about learning the skills necessary to be able to cope with these distressing feelings and then be able to speak and prepare to speak to their parents in order to give voice to their parents as to what they feel, which we call prepare for attachment enactments. So the ABFT Adolescence Alliance, again, is in 3 phases, where we're rapport building, orient the client to counseling, explore the adolescent's life. We're looking at goals where we're conceptualizing the self harming behavior, explore rationale for ruptures, and solicit change talks and barriers to change. And the task and the skills, explore and prepare and practice for session with parents, learn skills to deal with negative thoughts and moods and reactions to parents, and explore ways to cope in the absence of change. Session 8 through 12 is when we're focusing on the parent. So this is the parent only. And the task, again, is to build that therapeutic alliance. The goal is to empower parents and foster commitment to protect child from another generation of abandonment. So we want to be able to identify some of the current stressors that's inhibiting their ability to connect with their child. We want to explore histories of their personal attachment ruptures that may be impacting their ability to connect with their child. And we want to teach and engage in role play for emotional coaching and refer for personal counseling if needed. ABFT Parental Alliance. So here, and it's three phases yet again. So we got the building rapport, oriented therapy, identify strengths and assesses, explore contents of parents' life stressors, kind of what we've already talked about. In phase two, we want to establish goals. We want to solicit change talk to enhance attachment and assess readiness for change. In phase three, the task and the skills is to assess past conversations and interaction. What was it like in times past when you tried to connect with your child? What did you see the barrier were? Explain structures of attachment tasks. Prepare for reactions from the adolescents. We want to get them ready to take in how the child feels about their connection and their relationship. We want to assess their comfort level with these emotions because these emotions may be very strong and may be very hurtful. We want to teach emotional coaching and obtain permission to intervene and coach during that reattachment session. And so session 13 through 16 is the reattachment, and the task is enactments. The goal is to facilitate a discussion about attachment ruptures. Adolescents disclose and discuss core conflicts. Parent engages in emotional coaching. Adolescence uses DBT and interpersonal skills. Adolescents and parents work through and challenges and problem solve. Trust and communication reemerges. Parents work as more of a team. Adolescents feel safe in turning to parents for help. And adolescent eliminates self-harming behavior. So again, we have three phases. The adolescent opens up and shares. So here we're encouraging the adolescents to share um, their perspective of the attachment ruptures. And then we set the stage for the work. They express unmet attachment needs. They explore the emotions and the thoughts associated with the rupture. The parents engage in that emotional coaching where they empathize and they explore the primary emotions that the child brings forth and explore contributing factors to the rupture. And in phase two, the parent opens up and shares. Parent shares their personal attachment ruptures, and parent apologizes if appropriate. And then phase three, where we continue and repair, assess adolescents' reactions and willingness to forgive, explore additional ruptures if time permits, summarize, check in, and plan for at home enactments and next steps. So we're going to look at a brief case conceptualization to kind of help drive home some of these things. So this is Katie. Katie is 14 and in 8th grade. Katie was reviewing some homework with her teacher when the teacher noticed fresh superficial cuts on her wrist. The teacher asked Katie what happened, and she responded that her cat scratched her. The teacher examined the cuts and saw that the cuts were horizontal cuts and that did not appear to be scratches from a cat. The teacher asked if Katie would not mind going to the school nurse to get the scratches checked out. Katie did not want to, but agreed. Katie was escorted to the nurse and the school social worker was called. Katie was evaluated and SASH was called. Katie denied intent to kill herself. She stated that she just wanted the pain to stop. Katie was reluctant to share what pain. Katie denied any form of abuse. A referral was written for Katie, and mom was called, and she was informed that Katie needed to see a counselor before returning to school. So, case conceptualization. These are some of the things that we would obtain during their first session. The demographics and the culture. 14-year-old African American girl who lives at home with her mom, who's 42 and a Caucasian. Both parents are educated and hold professional jobs. Mom is a nurse, dad is a CPA. Parents divorced a year ago. Dad, 45, African American, lives in a nearby suburb. Dad has a new girlfriend with two stepkids, 10 and 13. Katie's developmental and academic milestones met at appropriate times. Katie repeated sixth grade due to problems at home. After the divorce, Katie transferred to a new school, and her current grade is eighth grade, and she struggles with math and reading. Katie's symptoms: she presents with a persistent low mood, which she states began 3 years ago. She has a decrease in appetite, which has manifested through weight loss. She's hypersomnia. She is irritable. She has isolative behavior, difficulty concentrating, low self esteem, guilt, shame, and self harming behavior, which began 3 years ago. These are some of the genetic factors, environmental factors, parent emotionality, and modeling of fear and avoidance, and environmental support. Genetic factors: maternal history of depression, maternal grandmother and aunt, paternal history of anxiety and bipolar, paternal grandfather and aunt. Environmental factors: move to a new neighborhood, middle class, change schools from public versus private. Mom work hours change from part time to full time, and she has an erratic schedule. Parent emotionality: mom manages mood by drinking and taking sleeping pills and loads up on coffee the next day. No friends or social outlets, eats dinner in her room after getting home very late from work. Dad manages mood by immersing himself in work, constantly under pressure to prove himself at work in order to make partner. Modeling of fear and avoidance. Unhealthy communication modeled aggression. Both parents drank when things got bad, isolate and escape by working or staying out and seeing other people, which was the dad. Environmental support. No expectation to participate in age appropriate activities. Mom spend very little time with client. Dad ignores clients on visits and spends time focusing on stepkids or work. So let's look at Katie's treatment goals. Addressing unhelpful thoughts that lead to negative emotions and self-harming behavior. Learn mindfulness skills. Enhance stress tolerance. Enhance interpersonal skills. And learn assertive communication. Goals for the parents: explore their own childhood attachment relationships, increase empathy for adolescents, need for emotional support and protection, and learn emotional coaching parenting skills. Family goals: strengthen and do not blame, enhance communication and rebuild trust, enhance family connections. So let's look at the therapeutic skills and tasks that we would want to teach this family. So first of all, we need to educate Katie on what is distress intolerance. Distress intolerance is a perceived inability to fully tolerate unpleasant, aversive, and uncomfortable feelings, accompanied by a desperate need to escape or avoid the unpleasant feelings. It is often linked to a fear of experiencing a negative emotion. It centers on high intensity emotional experience. That is, when the emotion is hot, strong, and powerful. Intense despair after an argument with a loved one, or intense fear while giving a speech, kind of like right now. It is not the intensity of the emotion itself, but how much one fears it, how unpleasant it feels, how unbearable it seems, and how much one wants to get away from it. that determines if one is intolerant of distress. Note that is the more we fear, struggle with, and try to avoid any forms of distress, it genuinely worsens the distress. Fear and avoidance of the distress actually makes it worse. DBT skills: emotional mind, wise mind, and reasonable mind. Emotional mind is when feelings control a person's thoughts and behavior. One tends to act impulsively without considering the consequences. The reasonable mind is when intellect governs decisions and behavior. Plan and decisions are based on facts. In this case, emotions are totally ignored. The wise mind is in which one is able to recognize and acknowledge feelings while responding to situations in a rational way. Here is a little snippet of Katie using wise mind or acknowledging wise mind. The counselor: Katie, now that you understand distress tolerance, emotional reasonability, and wise mind, can you tell me what mind that you've been using to deal with your situation at home? And Katie says, it seems as if I get caught up in my feelings. It seems as if they hit me like a speeding freight train that I cannot seem to stop. They take over. And this is when she begins to look down. Then I want to cut just to stop thinking about the pain. Counselor: Katie, what mind do you think you are using now? Katie said, I think it is my emotional mind again. And then the counselor said, that seems right. Katie, it seems that you are ready to go to the next step in learning how to tolerate these emotions. What do you think? I don't know if I'm ready, but I want to try. Will it help me deal with the pain better? This is good. Guess what? Katie says, what? You just did a great job in using your wise mind. I saw how your emotions were rising up, but you did not run, and you made a conscious and rational decision to move forward. You are off to a good start. DBT educating on emotions. Helping Katie to see emotions differently would be very key. Fear is useful to survival. It can help in the event of a real threat to survive. Anger is useful to help us act appropriately when someone else is experiencing injustices. Sadness is useful in that it helps us realize how important things and people are to us. Katie is feeling pain primarily due to the situations that precipitated the divorce of her parents. Her parents used to argue a lot, and as a result of that, uh, they used to argue over Katie. And so Katie began to feel as if she was the blame or the cause of their parents' arguments and their breakup and their divorce. And so Katie first started off just feeling like she shouldn't be here. She was a burden and she was a problem. But now Katie is learning to deal with that pain and learning to move forward. Emotions are not permanent, and that's one thing that Katie had to understand. Even though it seemed like her pain was perpetual, she needed to recognize times when she wasn't in pain. She needed to recognize times when she wasn't sad. And for some, they're like a wave. For some, they're like a cloud. And for some, they're like a fast moving train. And as we saw, Katie identified her emotions as a fast moving freight train. Trying to get rid or avoid emotion does not make them go away. It can make them more intense and come back with a vengeance. DBT acceptance. Instead of trying to escape, try acceptance. Acceptance is not about having to like emotional discomfort or being resigned to feel miserable or wallowing in negative emotions. It is about seeing the negative emotion for what it is and changing how you pay attention to the emotion. Accepting the way towards your emotion often changes the effect that the emotion has on you. This approach is often referred to as learning to watch your emotions mindfully. DBT mindfulness. So, there are three things that we look at for the DBT: to watch, to describe, and then imagine. Watching your emotions means paying attention to whatever you are feeling in the present moment, observing as the intensity might increase, hold its course, decrease, or shift and evolve into a different feeling. Giving words to what you are feeling is very key to the mindfulness process. Describe to yourself the emotion you are experiencing. The language used to describe your experience is not judgmental. So, in Katie's case, she felt like she was beating herself up. She was struggling with guilt from her parents' breakup, and she was struggling with guilt with feeling the way she felt. And so she needed to realize that she did not need to judge herself harshly for feeling the pain. She had suffered a loss. What one feels is not deemed good or bad, right or wrong. It just is what it is. And then we imagine, where we use the use of imagery can often be helpful in allowing yourself to foster a watchful perspective. So here's Katie's mindfulness scripts. So this is what she did. She recognized and allowed her emotions. I'm feeling hurt or deep pain. It's okay. I can allow myself to have this feeling. I can make space for it. I don't have to be afraid of it or try to get rid of it. And she also would add, I don't have to cut. Here's where she watches and describes her emotion. I can just watch this feeling and see what it does. I don't have to get caught up in it. I can feel it in my heart. It feels as if my heart is broken in pieces. I feel it in the pit of my stomach. This is just an emotion, just a feeling to be felt, nothing more and nothing less. I am not this pain. I am the watcher of the pain. The pain does not control me. The pain is just like a fast moving train. If I sit still, it will pass. It will not stop and it will not stay. I'm watching the pain train go by. The pain is decreasing. The heaviness is lifting and my stomach is relaxing. And then now she returns to the present. I will turn my attention back to the task I'm doing now, noticing what I can feel, hear, see, smell, taste. And if that does not work, I'll turn my attention towards my breath being my anchor to the present moment, noticing in each breath and each out breath, and deal with emotional comebacks. Where she feels the emotion returning, but she says that's okay. That's what emotions do. They will rear their head again, but I'll just go back to watching it again and realize it's just another fast moving train. Becoming your child's life coach. Here is where we shift and start teaching the parenting skills. Attending to, naming, and validating an emotion or emotional experience goes a long way in reducing the power of pain. And this is what we want to encourage the parent to do. So this is the model of emotional coaching. Step one is to attend to the emotion, where you're teaching the parent to attend to the child's emotional experience by approaching the situation calmly and acknowledging the presence of the emotion. Step two, you're teaching them to describe it. Put into the words the emotions or the range of emotions that you think that your child might possibly be experiencing. Step three, you validate the emotion. This is the most important and yet the most challenging of all the steps of emotional coaching. Validating involves putting yourself into the loved one's shoes and conveying understanding of their experience as they are experiencing it. And step four is meet the need. When meeting the emotional need, it is important to refer back to the basic emotions. Each emotion has a corresponding need from the environment. And that's going to be very key in repairing the ruptures. And step five, when this step is required, problem solving communicates. I will help you sort this out. And it can be very helpful, but only if it comes after attending, labeling, and validating your child's emotional experience. The power of validation. When teaching a parent to validate, it is also very important to remind them to resist going on the bright side, explaining the child's situation away with logic, but trying to help them to see the situation as they see it. It will help though if invalidating, if they will help them to improve their relationship. It encourages them to keep the child coming to you when things get tough, and will help them to move forward from the emotional challenge. Special note, when validating, it is also very important to speak the unspoken. Speaking the unspoken involves speaking that truth that you both know, but neither of you want to say out loud. Therapeutic outcomes. Identify and articulate core attachment ruptures, abuse, neglect, criticism, control. And in this was feeling the arguments that the parents would have concerning Katie, and feeling like she was stuck in the middle. And then both of them seemed to pull away from her, alienating her and isolating her in the process of what they were going through. Identifying primary emotion associated with these intense experiences. Increase comfort and entitlement to express these thoughts and feelings, and teach parents to emotionally reconnect with coaching and validating a feeling. So, the whole purpose of this approach is to get the child to give voice to her feelings, is to give that output, and for the parents to fully understand what the child has been going through, and especially in the case of Katie. The mom did not know that Katie was engaging in self harm until she got a call from the school. The mom was totally unaware of how Katie internalized everything that was going on in the household, and how she was carrying the pain of both parents. And so giving up space, a safe space, and the opportunity for Katie to give voice to those feelings, and also teaching the mom how to respond to those feelings and to validate those feelings, and then offer a healing environment for both of them to be able to share in a different way and work on repairing this attachment rupture is very key. In engaging in these outputs, we create outcomes which have a lasting impact on the relationships. Thank you.
So the first one is from Melinda, and she's saying, I work in a prison and NSSI is an ongoing everyday issue. We have to respond as if it is a true attempt or SI. Often it becomes identified as manipulation. How do you deal with these? Do you have some suggestions for the review?
In regards to the prison, is this adults or is this adolescent?
We're going to have to wait for an answer of that. Maybe
But
make
you
an
know what?
assumption to start with.
Yeah, I will. I will.
Oh, here we go. So she said adults. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, in adults, so it could be a form of manipulation, but it could be the fact that they're dealing with the pain of being institutionalized. You need to assess. You need to assess, and you need to ask questions that will try to get to the core as to why they are engaging in this behavior. You need to actually ask them to give voice to what is going on with them. And if they are using it as a manipulation, it's still a cry for help. What are they trying to do? What is the goal of this act? Is it to get to a place where they feel safe and secure? What is it? So the goal would be to assess the situation, ask those questions, determining what their goal is, what their aim is as to why they are engaging in this behavior. What is it doing for them?
Thank you, Beryl. Dustin is asking, what actions would you take with a teen who either refuses to open up to express their concerns about ruptures in the familial relationship, or who refuses to attend counseling altogether?
Well, the thing is that to establish that rapport. So when you have a little resistance, you kind of got to roll with it. Sometimes it's just about changing your approach. You may have to take a few more extra sessions with this child individually to establish rapport. I usually, when the child kind of is a little bit non-responsive, I just take the mind off of it. I I break out the Uno cards. I break out the Jenga. Um, and I also have these cards called mixed emotion cards that I got from Amazon.com, which is amazing. Sometimes I just give them those cards and I say, hey, why don't you select 3 or 4 cards to express how you feel right now? And then it begins to open up the avenue for discussion. You just have to be creative in getting them to trust you. If they're not opening up, it's a trust factor. So we have to find ways to build that trust.
Thanks, Beryl. Before we go too far from that previous questions, Nasomi is asking if you could answer the same question with relation to working with youth in a correctional setting.
How would you establish rapport? Well, you have to
Yeah,
utilize
the
the.
first, yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh,
The first question, yeah. So, know how you
oh,
answered for adult males. This is
yeah.
going to be for youth, for adolescents, for example.
Okay, I got you. So in an adolescent setting, you still it's still kind of the same way. You still got to figure out what's going on. Why are they engaging in self harm? Did they have a history of self harming even before they came to the prison? If not, 9 times out of 10, they're already separated from their parents. So there is a rupture in attachment. And so maybe trying to focus on allowing them to give voice to some of the things that they experience in their home setting, serving as a model and example of being a representation of a secure attachment would be very, very helpful. They need to know that they can be trusted. However, in this setting, there may be some manipulation. They may be trying to do a lot of things to escape some things. But still, that's the whole thing about NSSI. It is a form of avoidance and it is a form of escape. So we need to understand what need does this serve? What need is it addressing?
Thank you very much, Beryl. Cheryl is asking, would you elaborate on how emotionally damaged parents are expected to engage in emotional coaching of an adolescent? What does this look like?
So, if a parent is emotionally damaged, so in the situation with Katie, her mom had found out that her husband was having an affair. But the breakdown began before that. So they were having issues. He was a workaholic, and she was trying to start off her nursing career. And so when the breakdown became a little bit frustrating between them, she began to withdraw and try to cope on her own. She felt rejected. She felt abandoned. She felt betrayed. And then they began to fighting because she confronted him about the affairs that he was having. And then that caused a constant victory over the child. So, in regards to a parent that is emotionally damaged and trying to help repair an emotional rupture with a child, they may need individual counseling themselves. But in the context of this setting and what we're trying to do, the goal is to repair the rupture between the parent and the child. And as you notice on one of the slides, I put that we might have to refer the mom for individual counseling.
Thank you, Beryl. Sandra is asking, during the counseling process of ABFT, are both the parent and the child present? I ask because you speak of coaching the parents who work with the child. How is that done?
So in the very first session is the initial session where they're together, and then after that you're meeting with the child alone, and then after that you're meeting with the parent alone. Sometimes it just depends on how you want to set that up. You can set it up where in order to kind of decrease the frequency or depending on the parent's schedule, where if you have an hour session, maybe the first 30 minutes is the child by themselves and then the second 30 minutes is the child by themselves, or you can have the child come in for a full session by themselves and then maybe later on that week have the parent come in. You can work on it conjointly like that. But the goal is when you're having those sessions for the adolescent and the parent, they are separate. And what the goal is to prepare them to come back together so that they can work on repairing the ruptures.
Thank you. Casey is asking, I work at a therapeutic foster care agency. Do you have any recommendations on how to make changes to the family interactions? Most of my teens do not have contact with biological family or haven't built a trusted relationship with their foster family.
So then that means that you would be the identified parental model in their life. And that means that you would have to continue to work to model that secure attachment. You would have to continue to work to help them to feel safe, coaching them through challenges that they've had with their biological parents and encouraging an enhanced connection with their foster parents.
Thank you, Beryl. Melinda's asking if you have a family session, how do you respond if the parent does not want to see the child separately? Does
How
not
do
want
you?
you to see the child separately.
Okay, well then that takes place in the beginning session where you explain to them the process of the process of the treatment. You explain to them that there will be times where you will see the child separate, and then you will see the parent separately. Um, Usually, what I try to do is to bring to light that the child wants to feel comfortable to get some things off their chest, and sometimes that they don't feel comfortable sharing in front of their parents. But we are planning to focus on getting to that point where they're able to share more openly and more comfortably. But I need your support in making this happen. So what we try to do is we try to encourage the parent to support the process. That's why that contract for change in the beginning is very important. They need to see the goal and the need for this whole process in order to get to that outcome.
Collaboration is key right there. Okay, so Matthew is asking, is there a reliable assessment that you can recommend that will help clinicians make sure they're not missing suicidal versus self-harm behaviors?
There are some assessments out there. Um, for me, I've used self assessments, but I've also just asked questions. As part of my standard assessment, I always ask about do you have any thoughts of harming yourself or anyone else? And I also ask, have you ever engaged in any form of self harming behavior? And then if I look at, I try to give them eye contact, and I look to see if there's any changes in their facial expression or their body language, which would prompt me to maybe want to drill down a little bit further. Self assessments are not always reliable because they can lie. I mean, they can lie verbally too, but I usually rely on asking directly.
Thank you, Beryl. Mark is asking, would you recommend the use of a family genogram in the determination of the family relational ruptures?
You know what? That would be a good tool to use. Yeah, I would recommend it, especially when you're working with the parent.
Okay, thank you. Sandy is asking if you can give more details on obtaining the mixed emotion cards. So maybe more details on how people can find them.
Amazon.com. Go to Amazon and just they're called mixed emotion cards. Type it in and you can get it. They are phenomenal. I use it a lot with, especially with my kids. Sometimes they come in, they don't talk. So what I'll do is I'll take the cards out and I'll say, hey, tell me, pick 5 cards to describe how you're feeling now. And when they pick those 5 cards, I ask them, why did you pick this card? And that hopefully will open up the door to communication and conversation. And then after we go through those 5 cards, I ask them again, go back to the deck, and I ask them to pick 5 more cards that would just best describe how they want to feel. And they'll say, feel about what? And I say, well, feel about your home or feel about this. Or I'll just say, how you want to feel right now. It just depends on where we're at and what we're trying to get to. But the mixed emotion cards are amazing.
Did you ever have a situation where you just couldn't sort of have a communication breakthrough with the client and the cards came in to the rescue?
Oh, I use that often. Often,
Can you give
sometimes
us
when
a couple of examples?
yeah, so I had a situation where I had a mother and a son that came in, and the son, he came in. You could tell that he did not want to be there, that he was being forced to come, and so usually in all my first sessions with children and teens and adolescents, I always invite the parent in for the first session because I'm trying to observe the dynamics between the parent and the child. So I usually ask the child, "Do you know why you're here?" And then, this child happened to just look at me and he shrugged his shoulders and then he dropped his head back down. And so I asked him, I said, well, what school do you go to? And he mumbled what school he went to. But then the mom, my mom, I noticed, kept on trying to interject and answer questions for him. And I said, well, I explained to mom, I said, Mom, at this point, I really need to try to work to establish a rapport with your son. I said, so do you mind stepping out so that I can try to communicate with him? And she was a little resistant at first. And she was like, well, no, I want to be in here. And I asked her, I said, why? You brought him here to get some help, right? So let me help him. And so she kind of eventually went and sat in the lobby. And so then I asked the young man to switch seats to sit a little bit closer. And his body language was still that of very closed off. And so then what I did was I asked him to turn around and have his chair to face me directly. And so I took the cards out and I said, asked him to do it. I said, listen, pick three cards to basically describe how you feel right now. And so he went through the cards, and he ended up picking like 10 cards. And I said, okay. I said, that's not bad. I said, so it seems like we're feeling a lot of things. And I said, so out of those 10, pick the top three or the strongest that you're feeling right now. And so he picked the top three, and one was angry, the other one was depressed, and the other one was lonely. And so I picked the angry first because I kind of wanted to get that out the way. So I asked him, I said, well, why are you feeling angry? And he said, because I don't want to be here. And I said, why is it that you don't want to be here? He said, I don't need to talk to no counselor. I'm not crazy. And so that helped me to understand some of his resistance, that his concept of counseling meant that he had some type of mental disorder. And so then I began to educate him to help him to understand that counseling is not just for people that have mental disorders. Sometimes people need help to sort through things. Sometimes people need somebody other than the people at home to talk to, that they can have confidence in and feel safe to share some of their deepest, 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 deepest feelings. And so he kind of said, okay. And so then I asked him, why did he pick depressed? And so he said that he was sad because life is not the way that he thought it was. He was a freshman in high school and he was getting bullied a lot. And he was struggling with school. He was struggling to fit in. And so it made him feel very sad. And so then I asked him about the loneliness. Why did he feel so lonely? And he said, well, when he comes home, he just stays in his room. He doesn't connect with his family. His mom and his father don't try to connect with him. And he said, so he feels like he's lonely at home as well as in school. So I hope that helped.
Thanks for sharing that, Belle. That's great. Rhonda's asking, how would you respond if an adolescent refused to show you their arms where the self-harm occurred?
Well, I can't force him. So I would probably do a little disclosure because when I was younger, my parents were having problems, and I engaged in self harming behavior, and I would tell them, briefly my story, and I would show them kind of where some of my scars are, which are pretty much healed, and I would let them know that I do understand. I would try to identify with them and try to meet them where they are and let them know that just because you're struggling right now doesn't mean that you can't get over it. And hopefully that would encourage them to feel safe enough to trust me, to show me. And if not, then I would just have to build up to it. But every time I would see them, as long as they kept coming back, I would constantly check in with them, ask about the self harming behavior, ask them if they would allow me to see.
Wonderful stuff, Belle. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we're going to wrap up the session now, but I wanted to give you the opportunity just to say some final words to those that are online now, or those that are watching also on demand later on.
I just want to thank you guys. I counted an honor and a privilege to be able to participate in this summit. This is my third year. It is my hope that this presentation was very helpful in helping you deal with the non-suicidal self-injury. It is very prevalent in our youth, and we need to get a handle on it. We need to be able to provide a safe space for them to be able to share some of the things that they're struggling with. We need to also take into account that their family connections, their parental connections is very key in helping them in the healing process. And so when you're working with your adolescents and your teens, make sure that you try to get the parents involved if it is at all possible. And if the parents need help for themselves, please refer them. Encourage them that if they get healing or get help, they're better able to help their child. And so that's what I want to leave you guys with. You guys are doing an amazing work. Continue to grow, continue to learn, and continue to help. Take care.